One of the most important elements for capturing great photos is light. Unlike other important photography elements like a subject or composition, light is the one that we have the least control of, especially when it comes to street photography. A heavily clouded day, or a complete overcast as they call it, is one of the most dreaded weathers for street photography. When the sky is completely covered with clouds, you have to work with light conditions that create low contrast scenes and scenes that have no shadows or lights or anything that can make your subject or your picture stand out. If you're like me and you're living in the northern hemisphere of this world, probably you understand what I'm talking about. Here the winters can be depressing, there is no light, and in general you may feel that you're uninspired to go out and take great photos. The same can happen if you're visiting a place just for a few days and suddenly you are stuck with an overcast and boring light. If any of this is the case, trust me, not all hope is lost. In a matter of fact, I believe that you can take your most exceptional photos not only when the entire environment works in your favor, but instead when you overcome all kinds of challenges and you create something unique that wouldn't be possible otherwise. With this video, I want to show you my most favorite techniques I use when I'm confronted with a bad light during an overcast day. Before I do that, I want to quickly remind you to hit the like and subscribe button, especially if you are enjoying watching my videos. Alright, let's start with the first tip of the day. This is probably one of my most favorite ways to be creative during overcast days. A fully clouded sky acts like a natural diffuser, allowing you to shoot against it without getting any annoying sunspots or any light beams that can create very distracting images. When the sky is completely covered with clouds, this is actually the best time to include it in your compositions. This way you can create some very minimalist photos that can make your subject stand out. If you want to get even more impressive results, try shooting from an angle that allows your sky to become the main background in your photo. This can be done when shooting upwards and usually can be achieved when you're under a bridge or stairs, for example. When using this technique, I usually like to overexpose my sky for around one stop, and if this is not possible, I usually will try to raise the highlights during editing. I do this because usually I try to create a nice and smooth white background instead of ugly shades of grey. I don't know about you, but I usually find the grey sky very depressing and distracting, and unless I'm going for a moody look, I usually try to avoid it. During a day with a grey sky and boring light, usually everything looks dull and uninspiring. There are no beams of light or shadows that can make anything in your frame stand out, and everything just looks depressing and uninspiring. To make things more challenging, most of the people, including me, tend to wear clothes with dark colors. That happens especially in the winter when you have the most boring light, and for this reason, most of the subjects tend to blend in with the general grayness of the environment. In this case, seeking out colors should be on top of your mind. Usually what I do is try to look out for people that are wearing bright jackets or maybe colorful subjects like a bus or a train or buildings, and I try to focus on shooting those. In general, almost anything with a bright color will do. If you find an object with bright colors, try including it in your frame and you will see that you may get some impressive results. One important thing to mention here is about editing. When you try to edit a photo that has a very bright color but the general environment lacks any saturation, probably you will see that this can create a very unpleasing color contrast. In this case, try to reduce the color saturation of the main color so it can match the muted tones of the general environment. This way you can create a smooth color transition and a result that is more pleasing to the eye. Sometimes you may get unlucky and you won't manage to find any scenes with interesting colors. After all, things don't always work in our favor. In this case, why not removing color entirely from the equation and just trying to shoot in black and white? Actually, this may be a great strategy, especially during the winter and overcast days. And don't get me wrong, shooting in black and white doesn't make photography easier, it just changes your approach when you photograph. There are two things to keep in mind when shooting in black and white. First, composition becomes your top priority. Black and white usually simplifies the scene, so composition must be strong in order to create a captivating photo. In this case, try to create a photo with a frame that either tells a story or shows something unique. For example, try to include multiple subjects in your frame, or get creative by including unusual elements, like a spiderweb. And second, try to find areas with high contrast. Usually when there is no color that can guide the viewer's eye, contrast becomes the main tool for our brain for defining shapes, details, and textures. During an overcast day, usually contrast is low, but you can still create high contrast scenes by shooting from a darker place towards a source of light. That can happen, for example, when you're under a cover place, like a tunnel, and you are shooting with a light being right in front of you. During clouded days, usually light is limited, and it becomes easier to use slower shutter speeds without having to carry an ND filter with you. Even during very cloudy days, you won't be able to use slow shutter speeds like 2 or 3 seconds without an ND filter, but at least you can step down to 1/5 or 1/8 of a second and can still get some impressive results. For this technique, it is important for your camera to have some kind of image stabilization so your photos don't turn out to be blurry. The good thing is that most modern cameras come with some kind of image stabilization, so this shouldn't be a problem for most of you. For example, I'm shooting with a Sony A7C II and I can step down to even 1 second and still get very sharp images. In case your camera doesn't have any kind of image stabilization, then you will need to find a place to support your camera or just use a tripod. If at this point everything else fails and you feel uninspired shooting outdoors, then why not changing your strategy completely and just focus on shooting indoors instead? This may sound strange in the beginning, but if you think about it, a big part of street photography actually takes place indoors. Think about shooting in train stations, inside trains or buses, or in museums, libraries, or even shopping malls. Places like this are a big part of their daily life, especially in an urban environment, and can give you the possibility to create some very compelling shots in a very unique places. Actually, shooting in all these kind of places is something I personally try to do when I visit a new place, because it helps me understand better the local lifestyle of a city or an urban environment. And to be honest, this may be the best way to create some very original and unique shots instead of focusing on shooting on all these overhyped places you see on Instagram or in social media. So yeah, in a few words, during an overcast day you can prioritize shooting indoors, and when the light improves, you can go back to shooting outdoors. These are my most used techniques for shooting during an overcast day with a boring light. I try to keep everything short and simple so you can have a quick reference guide that hopefully can inspire you to go out and shoot more during those dark days. Feel free to drop a comment below mentioning what other techniques you use for shooting during overcast days. I'm curious to hear what other creative ways there are out there, and I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas. And that's all for today, folks. Happy shooting, and see you again next time.